Those who would like to ask questions, please raise your hand and then come up. Cosma, you the first one.
Hello, Mr. Kurtyka. Thanks for your speech. Thanks for being with us today. I would like to ask you kindly about your reflections about COP24. How do you think there was big success then, but what's left after these years, if you may tell us? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So when I was still young Secretary of State at the Ministry of Environment in Poland, I was asked by Polish Prime Minister, to run a conference of parties, so the climate summit, which is taking place every year and which is run by the different country. So in 2018, that was the case for Poland, and we had this organization in Katowice. But that was a word which was completely different word. You remember in 2015, we had Paris Agreement. Paris Agreement, which is putting everybody on equal foot in terms of its responsibility for emissions, for global emissions. And it asked each of the country to develop its own nationally determined contribution. So how Poland, Germany, France, China, Saudi Arabia want to contribute to a global effort of limiting the rise of temperature to 1.5 degrees. How do I want to contribute to secure financing for mitigation and adaptation? Because that is the word, these are the words which are used in the Paris Agreement. But Paris Agreement was only a couple of pages of document. But then we needed to implement it, a little bit like you implement a constitution through laws. So Katowice was, in fact, providing the implementation of the Paris Agreement. So I negotiated with 196 countries, getting them to an agreement, and they needed all to agree. And I will skip you how complicated it is to negotiate over 2 weeks with 196 countries, but we did it. And Katowice Rulebook, which is the implementation book for Paris Agreement, is more than 100 pages document, which is providing what does it mean for countries? How do we build nationally determined contribution? How do we check that what we provided as data is accurate? How we ensure transparency of data? How we ensure that financial flows also are compatible with the Paris Agreement? All that was negotiated in Katowice. But then obviously, when I was in Katowice and I negotiated with my Chinese or American friends, that was a time of the Trump administration, for those of you who remember, 2018. So that was complicated because American President Donald Trump already then announced that he will withdraw US from the Paris Agreement. So I had to work a lot with our American friends and colleagues to keep them at the table. How did I say? What did I say? I said, okay, the world is changing. It's not anymore a Pax Americana which will be forever. You have China rising. Do you want to leave China alone at the table? That was an argument which worked. So I had Americans and Chinese, I had Europeans, and we successfully developed the Katowice rulebook. But then I was already then saying, and you can read it in a book if you want, I have written a book about it, I already then said that the world will be much more complicated. Already then I have seen that the world started to fragment itself. The Pax Americana started to be challenged by many countries. So I said, either we will be able to get an agreement now, or in the coming years, it will be increasingly complicated. And then luckily, if I may say, I was proved right. Because since Paris Agreement, since Katowice Rulebook, there was only one small portion of the Katowice Rulebook which has been added in Glasgow, Article 6, so-called Article 6 of the Paris Agreement. But then, more or less, we just ended any more production of big, worldwide, global legal frameworks for climate policy. We were unable to do it because we had COVID, and so one COP was missing. Because we have right now Ukraine war, Russian aggression on Ukraine, and then the world is completely splitted. Then we have this north-south divide, which is growing, and you can see Gaza events, you can see Hormuz Strait, where ships are being challenged. All this is putting into question the multilateral geopolitical global order to which we were used to. And the appetite for international global treaties, agreements is vanishing. It's more and more complicated to get them. Another reason for Europeans, again, to speak in a coherent manner and to take their sovereignty in their hands, including with energy.
Okay, next question. Okay, you will be the first one and pass the mic.
Okay, thank you very much. So I'd like to ask about the growth approach. What do you think? Is it possible to implement it on practice and start like doing some steps towards this policy?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mm-hmm.
Should I ask the question now? Or?
Yes, go on.
Okay. No, I just wanted to know, like, what's your perspective if there will be a change in the White House, and possibly Donald Trump will actually move the USA out from NATO, and there will be fragmentation in the European Union because everybody will shift into spending more for the military. Want it to be like a change that different states in the European Union will care less and less about the Green Deal or any pro-ecological reforms, and how to fight that phenomenon if it happens.
Let me first start with the growth question. And let me distinguish a little bit two perspectives. One is individual perspective, moral perspective. So when you are faced with consumer society, when you see all around you all the waste we contribute to, then you might have this temptation of saying the solution which I apply to myself by not wasting water, but switching my light, but by not using plastics, etc., etc. I started with the mild ones, if I may say. Yes, but you can follow this this reasoning quite far. It is extremely complicated to apply the same reasoning for societies, and especially in the tense international situation right now, it is extremely complicated because if we were to apply the growth solution, then we would have to apply it globally. Otherwise, you would have somebody who would say, okay, I claim to apply, but in fact, I will grow. So in a couple of years, in fact, I will dominate the world. So degrowth is unrealistic politically. And then we need also to understand economic and societal consequences of degrowth applied on a larger scale. Do we want, and this is why I started with this perspective, if we are completely coherent and if we say the world 200 years ago was better than the world which is today, then we say, okay, we don't use any more planes, we don't use any more cars, we shrink our cities, and we live twice shorter. Is it the world that we want to live in? So the problem is that it is extremely complicated to apply. So the challenge is right now to activate the third lever I was talking about, technology, in order to bring us solutions which will be sustainable. Because otherwise, going for degrowth on a global scale it is unlikely and I think extremely complicated. And then the second question. The second question is a little bit less related maybe with energy, probably related with new word. So I'm traveling quite a lot with between Europe and US, and I discuss a lot with American colleagues, obviously, as professors are doing as well also. There is a growing isolationist behavior in US, yes, and part of Republicans are very much forward thinking in this regard. Unluckily, it's the way Americans for centuries already perceived their place in the world. Okay, whatever Europeans are doing doesn't concern us. We Americans, we are well where we are. Shale revolution somehow helped them. Why? Because America was very much dependent on Middle East oil. You remember in 1945, there was a famous deal between American president and at that time king of Saudi Arabia, security for oil. We Americans, we provide you with security. You, Saudi Arabia, you will not interrupt the provision of oil to us. That fueled American economy, but that also protected with American military umbrella the region. It is shaking right now. We see that American umbrella is becoming increasingly challenged. I mentioned Hormuz Strait. There was recently seizure of Israeli-owned ship by Iranian guards. And obviously in the strait you have a lot of American ships, but paradoxically, very interestingly also, American ships are not anymore providing support to Europeans or Americans because they do not commerce that much with Gulf countries as does China. So you have American ships protecting Chinese commerce in the Strait of Hormuz. How long it can last, I don't know. But I think that we have, as Europeans, to prepare to the world in which Americans will be increasingly less interested about keeping Pax Americana all across the globe. They will have also to select their engagements. For the first time in history, last year, American debt costed more than American military. That's a triggering point. How sustainable is American way of life? How sustainable is American public deficit? How long Americans will be willing to playing the guardian of the world? Or whether, yes, they will be obliged to focus on one theater, and most probably, everything shows they will focus on China. So we have to take this into consideration, regardless of who is running the White House. Because when you can see Biden administration, in fact, is doing exactly the same as Trump administration with regard to China. So here we have a challenge for Europe, but also there was this, the Americans finally did the right thing, and we have seen the American aid for Ukraine being unlocked. So I do not want to paint the future into dark colors. America will be there. We have transatlantic community, community of values, community of defense, community of many aspects which are shaping our civilization. But at the same time, we as Europeans, we will have increasingly to be partners with Americans and not only to benefit from the umbrella of their protection.
Thanks for all answering my question, first of all. And I would like to come back, if you allow me, to that, because I'm just wondering how well the countries are implementing the things that are written in the rule book. because we have like several years passed already, so we can just, it's like you are the best person to assess whether they're like following the guidelines.
We had two very complicated events recently. First of all, COVID. During COVID, you remember that supply chains were broken all across the globe. And so we learned the tough way that whatever you have as resources within your sphere of influence, not so far from yourself, the better it is for you. Ukraine war also sent extremely nasty signals all across the globe in terms of rising inflation for food, for energy, lacking food. So we enter right now into a world where security, competitiveness is much closer to the hearts of decision makers than was previously multilateralism or environment or climate. And we need to take this into account, and we need to make sure that the policies that will be pursued will be more or less fitting within the challenges of the Paris Agreement. But this, again, will happen because of technological shift. I don't know whether you know, but last year, for the first time in the history, investments in renewable energy were bigger than investment in fossil fuels. Every day, more than $1 billion was deployed only for solar panels all across the globe. More than 500 gigawatts of additional capacities were installed last year in terms of renewables. And 500 gigawatts is, to put you in perspective, is 10 times Poland. So last year, only in solar, the world added 10 times capacity of Poland. And also, we have another element of optimism, which is extremely quick ramp up of electric vehicles. In 2020, 1 in every 25 cars sold in the world was electric. Last year, it was 1 in every 7 cars. So we have a switch in terms of ways cars are being propulsed from combustion engine to electrical. Obviously, it will take a lot of time, but technologies are supportive of the Paris Agreement goals. Geopolitics are not currently.
I have a question regarding, in particular, China, also the US to some extent, but in particular China. Personally, I'm fascinated by the country in many regards: culture, education, technical progress. On the other hand, it's quite an authoritarian country with all the downsides we know. So how do you perceive the challenge of collaborating in some fields while criticizing in others?
Extremely interesting and complex question. And I wouldn't limit my answer to the famous formula of Ursula von der Leyen, de-risking rather than decoupling. You need to think a little bit in order to, let's say, get in this idea. But more or less, yes, indeed, we are right now in the world where Chinese economy is extremely advanced in many sectors. And that was a conscious choice of a country which is run by a single party. Yes, and this single party had the levers on growth, on the banking system, which we in democratic countries we do not have. Also, in terms of subventions, also in terms of providing politically biased resources for some sectors of economy. And that was a conscious choice. So, for example, in this regard, China has invested a lot in electrification of mobility. And why so? Obviously, first of all, because China is lacking oil. And so for geopolitical reason, less it consumes oil, better it is in terms of sovereignty. But then it understood that automotive sector is one of the strongest levers for growth. This is how European economies were born. This is how American economy at some point was flourishing. This is how Japan, South Korea were the roots of the industrial success of these countries were in the manufacturing of cars, because it's an extremely innovative process. It is driving a lot of managerial tools, methods, organizations, a lot of innovation. So automotive sector is extremely important for competitiveness of a country. Germany is obviously the leading exporter in European Union, and car manufacturing is the leading export item of European Union. And so there is an important convolution. So, but right now we are in the world where BYD, Build Your Dream, a company founded in China, is selling more electric cars than Tesla. Than 1 in every 2 electric cars sold in the world right now are sold in China. That an average price of a model when you go to Shanghai or Shenzhen would be $10,000 or $15,000. That Chinese cars are right now piling up in Antwerp because they will be sold cheaply on the European market. And Chinese manufacturers, why they are piling them up in Antwerp? Because they are expecting that Europeans will raise taxes because of all the subventions that this industry got in the past. But China right now has an edge, the competitive edge in terms of electric vehicles. 75 or 80% of lithium-ion batteries which are produced in the world are produced in China. 5 out of 10 most selling models of electric vehicles are from China. And China is not anymore dominating only because of low costs. It's dominating because it has the power of technology. And, for example, the car industry has a big challenge. What to do with this? Most of them are collaborating. So the answer to your question through the lenses of the manufacturing industries of cars would be to collaborate. Let me bring you a couple of examples. Geely, a big Chinese manufacturer producing more than 4 million cars yearly, is having a stake in Mercedes-Benz, 10 or 11%, is owing Volvo, is having a common company together with Google. That's the driverless car together with Google. It is building factories all across Europe. Italian Prime Minister Meloni asked another Chinese company to invest in Italy. Stellantis is right now building a partnership with Chinese counterparts in terms of cars. Renault is selling its internal combustion division to a Chinese company. I mean, we have a lot of examples of collaboration. What are the limits of this collaboration? Because that would be the complete answer to your question. Well, the limit is that we as Europeans, at some point, we will have to protect the level playing field, because many of these technologies, many of these advances were not done in accordance with WTO rules, just the contrary. Then we will have to make sure that we know how to develop European competitiveness. And car industry is an extremely important industry for Europe. So what is our vision of the future of car industry? And here again, we come back to European competitiveness in terms of energy supply. And third, last but not least, is how do we want to supply Europe in terms of critical raw materials and minerals? Because it might be the case that we switch one dependence to the other, that we go from oil and gas dependence to the dependence on cobalt, lithium, and others. So there is a European strategy to be built on. I don't think that we should cut our ties with China. By the way, it would probably be impossible by now. But the question is, well, in the normal times, if I may say. But I think that we as Europeans, we need to develop a strategy on Chinese supply, and that we need to take full conscious of the way Chinese economy is functioning and is bringing its competitiveness to the international scene. And by the way, and last but not least, that is also a challenge for the biggest, for Europeans, for many European countries, because we are both present in China in terms of manufacturing capabilities and also commercing with China as countries. So the dilemma on China is quite big.
On behalf of my students, I will ask you a question from the business perspective, because we are talking about this macro competitiveness, and I'm not that optimistic as you are about the European competitiveness. I think we have lost Africa. I've just came back from Ethiopia. There were Chinese everywhere, every single restaurant in Addis Ababa. They are building roads of a very poor quality. However, they are there. So we lost Africa. We lost solar panel branch, as you said. We actually, European Commission established this program, but we know that we are way behind Chinese. And there are many, many other things where the European competitiveness is losing with Americans, with Chinese, with Indians. My question to you is about the Green Deal. Now, the Green Deal is probably we all agree that this is something that we should do as let's say, global leaders of this green transformation. But on the other hand, it costs, and the costs are being transferred to the business and to the consumers. Now, don't you think that, or maybe it's not about what you think, but what are your arguments for people who say that already we are losing the competitiveness? Now we have to deal with the Green Deal, which costs business, European business and European consumers. How can we merge those two things and be happy about this and try to be competitive in this very difficult world and very difficult times? Thank you.
I think that Europe is indeed facing an extremely important choice, because for the moment we were able to move in the direction of greening our energy production through renewables. But we didn't do anything regarding our fossil fuel dependence, especially on Russia, and we didn't do anything regarding manufacturing dependence, especially on China. So when the world flipped upside down, when the globalization is being challenged, as it is the case right now, because of Russia's aggression, because of South-North divide, etc., then we Europeans, we find ourselves squeezed between two energy paradigms. We are still dependent on fossil fuels, so we still need to beg all across the world, starting with US, please bring us some LNG. And we are equally dependent regarding alternative ways of producing energy, which is solar panels or batteries to store them. So I think that I truly believe that we have another moment of extremely important European political leadership to be seized, a little bit like Schuman, a little bit like other fathers, Gasperi or Monet, started with the European integration with asking themselves the question, what should be, how can we combine our energy resources and our energy futures? And they, at that time, answered with coal and steel. We will not be able to answer anymore with coal because coal is running out in Europe. We don't have enough coal, simply. We will not be able to do it neither with oil and gas. There will be not enough oil and gas for producing in Europe. And I would tend to think that we, as Europeans, we forget about innovation and we forget about two possible sources of energy. One is nuclear. And obviously, that is complicated, takes time, but building a highway is much more complicated than building a bike road. And still you can transport much more goods on a highway. So a nuclear power plant is a little bit like a highway for energy world. Yes, so you take time to build it, but once you build it, it provides you with the cheapest possible energy ever. Obviously, another one would be geothermic, and here we have a breakthrough to be done ahead of us. And if we as Europeans, we will be able to complete the greening of our economy and of our energy with a deal on what do we want as energy source behind this, then we will have a complete picture. But for the moment, Green Deal has been very much missing this industrial answer. So we were able as Europeans to answer the environmental and climate challenge by setting very ambitious, increasingly ambitious and sometimes over-ambitious targets. But we were not able to provide an adequate answer in terms of development of European industry. But this is we learned the tough way through American Inflation Reduction Act. Inflation Reduction Act, I had recently read a paper of Goldman Sachs, if I remember. Already they calculated that IRA will mobilize more than $1,200 billion, so $1.2 trillion for rejuvenation of American industry. Hundreds of thousands of jobs are being right now created in US and are being created also by energy-intensive industries from Europe. Because this is where they get enough subventions, this is where they got enough money to build new capacities. So if we Europeans, we do not answer our question regarding competitiveness of our energy, we will probably not be able neither to have competitiveness of our economy behind. So to my, let's say, the concluding remark regarding Green Deal. Green Deal will have to be reframed by the new European Commission with security and competitiveness at the heart. Without losing this ambition of carbon neutrality, we will have to rethink the way we get through and find a way which will combine security, competitiveness, and final target.
Have a big applause for Professor Michał Kurtyka. The Professor Joachim, dear students, I'd like to thank you for participation in this session. The session was about energy in the new world, but in fact it was about setting the crucial questions for the future of Europe. There is one thing which is very important for you, dear students. As you probably noticed, you didn't get clear answers from us, especially from Professor Kurtyka, because the answers will be in your hands. You are the next generation of Europeans who will take responsibility for this amazing continent, and responsibility means taking decisions, wise decisions. And we are all facing right now the most important decisions for the development of Europe. And I just hope that the European Week and all the meetings you have with the amazing speakers will help you to define how you perceive yourself as Europeans. Thank you very much, and thanks for being with us. and have a great day. Eventually in Warsaw we have a great day today. Thank you.